Greetings, fellow DC superfans. Bluedragonfive here.
And this is Eli from Little Blue Productions.
And folks, we are on the precipice of a new Superman movie coming out, so we
Indeed.
felt the most appropriate way to kind of gear up for that is to maybe not look forward, but look to the past and celebrate the essentially the definitive Superman, if not like the first cinematic Superman, Christopher Reeve, and not just his role as Superman, but the man's life, which was so wonderfully represented in one of the best documentaries I've ever seen, Super slash Man, the Christopher Reeve story, or Superman, the Christopher Reeve story. Crystal may or may not be included.
That's another thing. Like, is there a specific way to call it Superman? Like, or how you said it, Super slash Man?
I mean, look, it's like I think you're just supposed to say Superman, but it's a whole like the division, the duality of like how he plays Clark Kent, Superman, kind of represented between super and man. So I mean,
Yeah.
I kind of like to say super slash man, but super basically super pause man. That's kind of how you're supposed to say it.
That's what I was gonna say too, because it would be like Super Man. That quick second pause. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wondered because that always kind of bugged me. Like, what would be this? What is the specific way to say the first words of the title of the documentary? So, well, and technically now we know.
Yeah. So, how do you feel about the documentary? Now you finally seen it. How do you feel about it?
Well, because I mean, ever since the documentary was announced, and ever since you and Tiki talking about, well, yeah, Tiki most prominently talking about his experience seeing Superman in the September movie memoirs podcast you both did. With what he said about that documentary, his experience, the details he talked about, and even before that, I of course had seen the trailers, like all of us did, and it was pretty interesting and exciting to see that we were going to get a documentary that was all about the man himself, and especially because it seemed to make sense that we we now have a documentary that centers on the late legendary Christopher Reeve, the definitive Superman, and having the chance to finally watch it, I actually had to rent Superman on Prime, and actually had to watch it twice. And yeah, I gotta say, like, with me finally having watched the documentary, man, because this is definitely a 10 out of 10 for me. What this documentary has to offer about the whole like story of Christopher Reeve, like through his acting career, most prominently Superman, his life outside of acting, outside of being, the Man of Steel, and when it comes to documentaries, I've brought this up in past reviews I've done on the Blue channel when I've reviewed documentaries. When it comes to documentaries, they can tell us they tell us more on what's being covered in these documentaries. Like, yeah, we know of this person and this and that, but there's more to it that we don't fully know and don't have the full knowledge of. Like, when it comes to Christopher Reeve, we've known that this man was Superman. We knew, he had that infamous accident in 1995, but, obviously for some of us, there was more to Christopher Reeve that we didn't know about. But until, long behold, we had this documentary. And this documentary, without a doubt, is so impactful. It's so heart-wrenching. Especially, yeah, because this is the life of Christopher Reeve. And with what they talk about, those that knew Christopher Reeve, his family members, some actors and actresses like Susan Sarandon and Glenn Close, who were close friends to Christopher Reeve, and with what they talk about of Christopher, those like, say, from one or two doctors and one or two people who, like Christopher Reeve, are disabled and stuff like that. And yeah. And I know you, Dragon, because obviously, since you had already seen it, of course, it was going to make it made you cry. Even Tiki knew it would make you cry. But yeah. But as for me, I don't really cry when I watch movies, TV shows, and documentaries, but I did feel the impact. Obviously, I felt the impact with what this documentary have, and there's no denying that. It can, even if you don't cry, you can still feel the power and the emotion in whatever it is that you're watching, and it does depend. But just overall, I'm glad to have finally have seen this documentary, and what more do I have to say? It's definitely a masterpiece of a documentary all about the man himself, Christopher Reeve.
Yeah, so I'll read Code Geass Anime Fan we have in the comments here mentioning, I love the documentary on a deep personal level. It's my favorite film of last year, and my favorite documentary. Christopher Reeve is one of my favorite actors. Documentary helped me appreciate him even more never
Oh, yeah.
before, and I already held him in high regard, which, of course, is very universal. I mean, Christopher Reeve, I really heard a bad word about Christopher Reeve. For me, I agree full heartedly. One of the best documentary, honestly, one of the best documentaries I've ever seen. Absolutely, the documentary of last year.
Mm-hmm.
I think it made my top three when I did like the movie list last year. I forget if it was number. I was in contention. I don't know if it. I don't. It was between number 1 and 2, I think. So I don't. I forget where it shook out to be, but it was very much up there. I think I might have put it number 1. I can't recall. It was on the bubble. I know that much. Regardless, Superman means a great deal to me, especially the making of it. And Christopher Reeve has always been the driving force as to why the movie and the character worked as well as it did. And it's this movie. Christopher Reeve has always had a beautiful and tragic story, and this I feel was the best and most respectful possible way to tell that. For posterity, for the tomes of history that like 20 years after his death, uh, you know, it's a lot of stuff I knew, but there's also stuff I didn't know, which was very insightful. And just the presentation, it really feels like we're glimpsing these intimate moments with Christopher Reeve. The whole movie quality really got me. I love how we kind of opened with that, and it was just I was lucky enough to see this in theaters. I really wanted to because I remember it was going to be a Fathom event, and they were going to do it only like essentially for like a kind of like a 2-day only kind of thing for his for the anniversary. And I believe me, I wanted to be there, but I was at the Comic-Con that day, so I was in a bind. I was so relieved that the movie had done so well and gotten so much good buzz reviews, and so many people saw it. They decided to kind of give it a wider release, so I was actually able to see it, and it was I'm so glad. So glad I was able to versus having to wait for it to eventually come to Max. You know, it was an emotional experience. I mean, I don't look. All I know is every time I rewatch that, we get to this one part, and I well up. I don't know if I'm going full. It's like if I needed a cathartic cry, it would be to watch that one clip. That was also in the trailer, which already is like, oh god, when we get to that.
What clip is that, Dragon?
Well, when Christopher Reeve actually made people walk, which of course the Academy completely snubbed.
And Dragon, if I can just say, I think as of now, I'm definitely on the same page with you and Tiki, because like it's so unfair that great documentaries like this one in particularly do not get Oscar nominated.
Nope. And look, I know we throw around the term "snubbed" a lot because we want movies we like to get nominated. But seriously, you look at the Academy Awards,
Yes.
The documentary category is always it's skewed a lot of the really great, really like ones that celebrate pop culture and movies and the special interest pieces. And it's always like you got something artsy or important or like about a specific field of study. It has to be there's like an educational or like a wartime mandate. It's never about like the impact on the human condition. Like won't you won't you be my neighbor or a Superman Christopher Reeve Story.
Mm-hmm. So Won't You Be My Neighbor that's another one where it should have gotten an Oscar nomination, but yet it didn't.
Yeah. Well, frankly, it should have won too, but it should have been nominated at the very least.
Because this is Fred Rogers we're talking about.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The Academy's never going to learn it. Honestly, look again. This made the paralyzed walk again. If they're not going to nominate this, I don't know what's going to get. I really don't know.
I know, like the one documentary. I don't know about you, but like one documentary that I really enjoyed was Super Size Me, and that got an Oscar nomination. Yet it didn't win, but still being nominated was great. So
Yeah, that was a solid case. Though. I mean, it got
yeah,
got nominated. Now that's more than enough for that one. Yeah.
yeah.
I
And if I
forget
could
what it was
also,
up against, but
yeah, and if I could also say this because you mentioned seeing Superman in theaters and Fathom events, like I just feel like mentioning this because Dragon and also that goes for you, Kogias. I don't know about you guys, but my dad and we got to, I think, yeah, even as of this stream, for me especially, I only got to see one documentary on the big screen, and this was, yeah, shown by Fathom Events. Both me and my dad, we love the band Rush, and Fathom Events screened the documentary about Rush, where, yeah, their final tour days and such. So I just felt like mentioning it because, yeah, I too having an experience seeing a documentary on the big screen, and especially coming from Fathom Events.
you know what's funny?
What's that?
When I saw the Christopher Reeve documentary, I saw it with my father as well.
Ah,
Yeah.
And what did your father think of the documentary itself?
He loved it.
Did he get teary eyed like you too?
Well, I don't think he'd admit it, but probably. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, look, I guess it does depend on if if documentaries like this one will get to you, and if they do make you cry. So, but
Anyway,
if that's the case for your father, then yeah, just like what you said, he wouldn't admit it. So,
well, I mean, look, it's not even like he's like an uber macho thing. Like I've said it before. My father's kind of like Hugh Neutron meets Goofy, but with a little bit. But again, a little bit of soul, like the soul of Herb Copperbottom from Robots. It's kind of like the combination I always use to summarize my father. But I think when I got out of the movie, though, he did. I said, "What did you think?" He said, "Man, that was really sad." But he said, like, it was an appreciative way. Like, it was
yeah,
really remarkable. Like, man, that was like, I think he was. So it's kind of like the closest thing to admitting, that he doesn't really think deeply about a lot of movies a lot of the time. But it was like more of
yeah,
like he's just more like excited about he loves Iron Man, so like he'll be geeking out about the Marvel stuff, like in kind of a more broad, kind of broad strokes kind of a way. So in that respect, I kind of read it that it did hit him on the core. I mean, when it streamed on Max, my folks saw it again. My mother, she really liked it. So everyone's kind of. I think that's a good omen. My mother usually hates everything that I like. So,
yeah.
all right.
Yeah. By the way, because Kogias to shout out to Kogias once again, because a few comments he left, like this one's directed at you, Dragon, where he says, "Dragon, I respect you for considering putting the documentary at number one. From what I remember, I think that you gave the top spot to Deadpool and Wolverine."
I did, and that was that's like picking between my children on that one. We got Deadpool, Wolverine. I got the Christopher Reeve documentary. It's like they were. I did seriously consider putting it number one, but that's probably what happened there.
Well, because let's face it, Deadpool and Wolverine was definitely one of the biggies of last year.
Yeah.
And Kogios also says there's only one film that's ever gotten me to cry, but I still felt heavily moved by the documentary. And he also says, I don't think that I've ever seen a documentary on the big screen. I watched the Christopher Reeve documentary when it came to Max, and yeah, the same goes for me. Although I didn't watch it on Max, as I said, I rented it on Prime. So.
Right. Okay, so without further ado, let's start breaking things down. So I guess maybe the place just to kind of as a jumping off point.
Yeah.
So the opening of the film, we build atmosphere, we build nostalgia, we have the underpinning of foreshadow and triumph, with the with the journey that Chris Reeve will undertake and kind of the story of our documentary. And I love how in a full circle way we open and close on Christopher Reeve talking about heroes, we
Mm-hmm.
recontextualize it by the end and how he redefines being a hero. And one of my favorite details that we use the haunting scream from the '78 film. When he's just the beautiful moment of acting when he has like the dead Lois Lane, he's just yelling skyward before he takes off.
Yep.
Yeah, which of course again is like kind of kind of a little foreshadow for like the outrage of a man who's kind of lost kind of lost a huge part of himself, as we kind of like the internal scream that he can no longer even do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So point being, we reestablish how integral Superman is to the framework of Christopher Reeve and what he would go on to essentially go on to kind of embody the character that he played in the movie, and how it's impacted many facets of his life. And again, so we begin the fusion of man with the icon and the symbol, which basically we then visualize with our framing device, with our visual framing device, which is the monolith in space. Which I love the detail that we have this monolith floating in space, and later on we have like the red cosmos kind of forming as like the cape to the statue monolith
Yeah.
as Christopher Reeve. So it's the fusion
Love
of
that.
man and
Love that
something more.
detail. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that detail, and especially if you don't mind me bringing this up as well, because where at times in this documentary, when we would cut back to that statue of Christopher Reeve, the statue of Christopher Reeve would get covered in kryptonite, and basically, showing his conditions and such, just getting worse and worse. So,
When I rewatched the documentary for our purposes here today,
hmm
I made kind of a realization. It's a stretch, mind you, but this is just kind of like this is more like like an Uber Superman fan thing I've always had, but it's kind of like it kind of dawned on me on this rewatch, where I've always when I watch the Superman movie, I always get bothered by the fact that, man, of all, why couldn't we make the crystal that he throws any color but green? Because it's reminiscent of kryptonite, but clearly it's the crystal that Jor-El's housed in. It forms the Fortress of Solitude, etc., etc. But in context here, one could look at it. Now, mind, this is me overanalyzing it, but one could look at it as perhaps Christopher Reeve's journey in his life in this documentary is that he turned essentially kryptonite. He turned, as we kind of like visualize with the statue, he turned kryptonite into the green crystal. He turned it into, he turns it into this blessing. He kind of in disguise. He turned like this thing that kind of kept him down and seemingly could have ended his life. And he turns it into this thing by the end of the movie that kind of like has saved lives and has kind of, it's brought knowledge and knowledge awareness and saved lives, like the Fortress of Solitude, like Jor-El. It's basically this whole movie is in a framework is kind of like it's him going from Superman to Jor-El by the end of it, where he is the floating head of knowledge. He is he's again, that's kind of how we frame in the documentary. We use his audiobook from when he read his the two books that he wrote, Still Me and Hope in Motion, where it's basically that's how we have him narrating his own story, very kind of like Jor-El, like leaving the messages for Kal-El to learn from.
yeah.
So it's going to add another level to like already the cool of just like the chilling framing device of, oh no, like you feel that pit in your stomach of like if the kryptonite's kind of taking over our statue, and we know what that means.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if we want to go ahead and bring this up now, because man, like I didn't expect this. This documentary does not waste any time to immediately dive into what happened to him in the year of 1995, because like basically, and with the home recordings that were taken by the Reeve family, one where they are celebrating New Year's, and which is in which yeah, that recording taking place on December 31st of 1994, and them wishing and hoping that 1995 will be a great year for them, but little did they
It's
know.
wonderfully bittersweet in the way they frame that.
Yeah, and I was about to say, little did they know what was
Yeah.
really going to happen that year.
So with that, we then transition into the backstory of like anyone would wonder, why the heck was Christopher Reeve on a horse? And we have a good backstory for it here, where essentially, he again, there's a lot of kind of prophetic kind of things in Christopher Reeve's story, which is always kind of like this. Again, it kind of makes it like something something to be studied in the history books of. He was doing a movie in which he needed to ride a horse, but he was allergic to horses. But he kind of he overcame that essentially. He injected himself with antihistamines every day so he could do it, and then it became a hobby and something that kind of he bonded with his kids, and it was like ingrained in the family and everything.
Yeah.
So and it's also a little bit of like we see in the backstory and kind of our archive footage and everything. We see that Christopher Reeve's relationship with his father, with Franklin Reeve.
Yeah.
His father was kind of an adventurer. He was he was a very scholarly man. And Christopher Reeve kind of was that as well. Only he was a little bit more adventurous. He was a little more, less kind of stuffed shirt about it. Where the father
Yeah.
from Skylight, Christopher Reeve was a little more kind of gregarious and kind of outgoing, and he was kind of the kind of a bon vivant of sorts. Just basically the more open-minded and approachable version of his father, which, as we kind of see later on, there was this scene that always it always really struck me. There are two bits with Franklin Reeve that struck me.
Mm-hmm.
The bit where we learned that initially he was very proud of his son for getting Superman, but then he found out it was like it wasn't like the acclaimed play, and instead it was like the comic book character, and he felt shame. And however, despite him feeling shame, he's not backing down from the interviews. He's not backing down from the limelight. He's gonna he's gonna play it off like, so what did your son say? Oh, he didn't say anything. He signed the contract, but he's not turning down the press for like, the fame and success of his son.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, there was this scene, and it's like kind of like what's not spoken, where we see Christopher Reeve in the chair with his father, and we don't spend time. We don't really have Franklin Reeve's like thoughts or response. And I think that it's kind of like what we left out kind of speaks volumes. There, it's just kind of like there's no words there between them. I wonder if he looks upon his son with maybe a pity or an acceptance, or maybe they worked through issues, maybe they didn't. Maybe it's just like he sees it as a weakness. I don't know. I think I don't know how much redemption there is with Franklin. We don't really need to know, but it's just kind of like the way we shot that. I like that it kind of leaves you wondering.
Yeah.
It feels unresolved, and I think that's intentional.
Yeah. Yeah, and I had to, because that was another thing that I didn't have no knowledge at all, because that man, when they talk about like, Christopher Reeve's family, and before Reeve started a family of his own, like with his parents and his siblings, half siblings and such, like, man. And as one of them, his half brother specifically said, where, it's, well, yeah, and even like one of his sons, Matthew, like saying that it's screwed up because it's effed up. Where, man, like knowing that Reeve's parents, they divorced and remarried twice, like, jeez Louise, and then of course, it's obvious, and with what they say, where Reeve's childhood was sadly not a good one.
Yeah. Yeah. But and also, we should probably mention, I guess, that the kind of with all the stuff we're going to be getting into here, folks, we're in a unique position with everything with documentaries in general, especially this one, where we have a multitude of very rich and interesting characters. But the fact is, they're not characters; they're people. These are real people, and so because of that, if we're saying, like we're remarking on like these, we're mainly talking about execution in a lot of this, but there's still like there's an appreciation for the human condition, like the facets of the Reeve family, and just kind of like the story that has kind of become again like a human life that's become mythology, which again is kind of the trippy thing with Christopher Reeve and kind of becoming the role, like in his day-to-day life to a degree. It's it's gonna be interesting. Just hopefully it gets taken in a positive light with what we're doing here. So if there's kind of like a weirdly we're talking about these people like characters, it's kind of it's kind of nothing really to be helped about that, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's see. Let me tell you one of the most, in terms of the execution of this documentary, I think one of the smartest and most haunting choices they did was it was such an inspired choice. It made all the sense in the world. The Rear Window clips that we incorporate and the way we use them, where
Oh, yeah, yeah, I know exactly. Yeah, you have a good point there.
it was such a perfect, brilliant idea in which we incorporate the archival footage, but also, and the only time there's only one other documentary I've seen rival something like this. Now, mind you, this was just kind of more like the stars perfectly aligned. The other one took a lot of work. Okay, so I don't think you've ever seen this. There's a documentary that came out a year or so ago. Well, probably 2 years ago. It's called Still, Michael J. Fox movie.
Oh no, Dragon, I've seen that, and
Oh, good.
it's yeah, it is. It's a really good documentary on Michael J. Fox.
And that documentary is phenomenal, and one of the best, the most wow. To me, the wow factor of that documentary is how we recreated not so much recreated footage. We did this wonderful hat trick in which we splice the footage with kind of stand-ins from behind that are so perfectly integrated. It looks like we're seeing like scenes that we like
Yep.
like kind of the behind the scenes of the man's life just kind of bled perfectly into using the clips of the movie. It was a brilliant device. So we've kind of done something similar here, only it's a lot more impactful in kind of the tone. It's impactful in a different way. That one's more of like almost a Robert Zemeckis effect within a documentary is kind of what we had with, which is appropriate for Back to the Future. Here
Yep.
again, it's like it reminds you of just how, because Rear Window is like the first movie that he starred in after his accident, really, and this was, not only that, it's just he really put a lot of himself in that movie and really like, redefined like how you do Rear Window, and just awakening to the disability with kind of the horror of just seeing like how the character Rear Window like kind of like dealt with his condition. And for me, the most harrowing part of the movie was the explanation of the pop off using the Rear Window footage, which is terrifying. And I had no idea that he had to deal with this. I had no idea what a pop off even was before this movie. Like, oh god, literally a pop off is like when the tube comes off and like the seconds counting, of a nurse hopefully running into the room and fixing it for you.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and it always makes me wonder, like, what the heck they had to go. I imagine the way they have to shoot that is, they have to wait for an actual pop off to happen in the shooting of that. That's my assumption. Maybe the inserts were just kind of like they didn't have to actually like elongate the pop off for the shooting. But I mean, when he's kind of struggling to breathe, I think that might have been like some method acting there. I don't know.
Yeah, and obviously, if that's the case where it did legitimately happen, well, obviously, because you know they'd have to get Christopher Reeve's blessing and approval of this, and obviously, yeah, because I'm sure that he, again, if it's the case, like he just was, he gladly and letting that happen, and for what was to specifically happen in Rear Window, so
Yeah.
yeah, because it did feel legit, so and within those clips.
Right. All right, let's see. But yeah, so our nonlinear editing, just insanely good idea, and the way in which we do it, just beyond just kind of like incorporating like the footage and everything, is it we jump all over the place because Reeve is the idea is like we kind of hit the accent up front. Reeve is reflecting on his past and elements of his life in contemplation as we. So it's not just like had this just been like a cradle to grave story or just been kind of like we just kind of go through like the accent and just kind of onward. It would have look. It would have gotten the job done, but it just feels like more intimate the way we did it because it's like a man would reflect on life and he's kind of processing a trauma after we've harrowingly just kind of summed up the trauma. Like, I had no idea. Like there was essentially Christopher Reeve was the procedure and had never been done before, and like he was essentially beheaded and then reattached. That's essentially how they saved his life.
Mhm.
And I had no idea. Like his mother, was campaigning to, we should probably take him off life support, which is kind of shocking. But it's
Yep, but of course, Christopher's wife Dana was there to not let that happen, and knowing and sensing that Christopher would pull through this and be very strong and such.
yeah. So and also the other thing too with the nonlinear kind of nonlinear editing style is it really it feeds into a moment later on in the documentary, Christopher Reeve kind of mentions that he doesn't see how he sees the timeline of life. He doesn't really look at it before the accident, after the accident. It's just kind of this. Basically, it's feeding into the message of the Christopher Reeve Foundation, which is go forward. Which this is going to be a kind of a geeky aside, but I being obsessed with the making of the original of the Superman movies as I was. I on they put it back on like the Blu-ray releases since, but they had like this giant metal tin with all the Superman movies. This is like around the time Superman Returns, so like from Dawn of Superman to Returns in '06.
Uh-huh.
They had all the things. They had this feature about they had a feature about Christopher Reeve. That's where I really learned about a lot of what happened to Christopher Reeve and the Foundation during that. And I saw like the little dog tag kind of necklace things they put out that said like the Superman logo and says "Go Forward." So I after I saw it, I went on eBay and I got this keychain that has the Christopher Reeve logo to go for. I still have it on my keys, but it's like I was so moved by like the idea that Reeve had been through this and he had gone through this journey, and I was so moved by that feature. And mind you, that was like a lot of my barometer for going into this was like that very well put together as kind of piece on Christopher Reeve that was on the it was like a mini documentary that was on the set. And it's like Donner like reflecting fondly on Christopher Reeve like during the shooting of the movie and everything, and then also kind of weighing in on some of the stuff that's happened to him later and all that. So I don't know. It was always just this great. It was always just kind of a great way of distilling down like what Superman's all about and just kind of what Reeve had done. Whereas like you can't really look back, you can't really define it. You have to basically play with the hand that you've been dealt.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, years later, Luke Cage comes out and it's like forward pops, always forward. He's like, man, that's I can sign off on that. Okay,
Yep.
Great minds think alike on that one. All right.
What a coincidence.
Yeah, no, but I love it though. It's good philosophy. So let's see. So we have like we kind of checking on many points in the man's life, like the Juilliard years in the '70s, which of course leads to Superman. We have Jeff Daniels, who I feel Jeff Daniels is kind of filling in for Robin Williams in this documentary in terms of. Well, I mean, in terms of like he's like the only actual.
I'm acknowledging, and not in a negative way. Just
Yeah, just this idea that Williams was his classmate and his roommate, and as the closest they was there, the closest person he had there to him, and Jeff Daniels being just a fellow classmate that they would have access to.
And there was also the late William Hurt.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, but William Hurt not available as well, so it just feels like Jeff Daniels been able to speak to a lot of like what happened there, including talking about William Hurt. Yeah, it's a shame the Juilliard class of the '70s. They're they're kind of dying off. I mean, Kevin Conroy as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was always trippy. Where they did go to Juilliard around the same time of each other. They weren't in the same classes. It was either they were a year removed, or they just weren't like in the same like dorm or classes together.
Yeah, especially because like in the early beginnings, where Reeve attended Juilliard School, and both he and Robin Williams attending, and the Robin Williams, the first clips that are shown of Robin Williams, and I know we're probably gonna have a special place to talk about Williams in this podcast, but for me, because like the first clips that are shown of Robin Williams, like when it comes to like the mentioning of them both of them going to Juilliard School, because Robin Williams, I think this was no, this is like one of his stand routines where because like we went to Juilliard School, be Shakespearean actors, just Well, imagine that, because like the fact that they were starting off doing Shakespearean stuff, but what they would do next, each of them would be pretty much like the total opposite. So.
Oh yeah, I love that we. I think every Juilliard student has like a great John Houseman story, and Christopher Reeve has his where that Houseman I think won the Oscar, and then Christopher Reeve says you must always commit to the theater unless they offer you a ton of money.
Yeah.
Yep. Then we had like I remember Kevin Conroy always had a really great story about John Houseman, where basically Conroy, it was really beautiful what Houseman, where it was this thing where Kevin Conroy, he was like his first play, I think, and he was he read the reviews, and the reviews were terrible, and they really laid it on, like, the critic really was mean to Kevin Conroy specifically, and Hausman just showed up, and he gave him like some words of encouragement. Then he went out there and he basically rallied the troops, saying, he says, I want to highlight that I had friends in the audience, and Mr. Conroy got, basically he boosted. It gave Kevin Conroy a really lovely ego boost, which was in
Nice.
front of everyone to really, like, make sure, like, ignore what the critics said. This kid was good.
And he was most certainly right. And what would come next in Kevin Conroy's acting career, most prominently providing voice work?
Moral of the story, kids: we don't get Batman or Superman, the definitive versions of Batman or Superman, without John Houseman giving the okay.
And with that also, had each of them had not attended Juilliard school.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, especially because I mean, like, Juilliard school is where a lot of big names, legends, how they first started off, they'd gone to Juilliard school, and what would come next for them.
Oh yeah. So I guess we should probably. You want to talk about Rob Williams?
I mean, if you want us to proceed on talking about Williams, that's fine by me.
Yeah, sure, let's do it. So Rob Williams, very much, a big pathos, a big pathetic kind of element of
Yeah,
this film. He's the heart of the film, to a degree. I think a lot of people going into it, again, I think for the layman, they might not be aware that Rob Williams and Christopher Reeve were as close as they were. Like Christopher Reeve, we mentioned the
yeah,
documentary. Christopher Reeve's like the godfather to Rob Williams' son.
yep.
Yeah, and it's again just the idea that they were kind of chaos and order. Robin Williams was like the chaos, as he says at the funeral. Like, I was his fool. To him, I was chaos, and it was just this. The idea, these are figures of struggle and of lives that kind of ended tragically, but they brought such joy to everybody.
Not to mention it because I feel like because you meant and because the documentary mentions that Reeves was the godfather of one of Robin Williams' kids, his son. The documentary. I mean, the documentary didn't bring this up, but Dragon, would you happen to know this? Where did Reeves' kids ever have a godfather? And if it would have been, say, Williams?
I mean, I don't. My assumption is that maybe he was the godfather to. Well, I think if he was going to be if he was going to be a godfather to anyone, it probably would have been Will Reeve, but I don't know.
Okay.
They called him like brother Rob, and they really but that could have been something they could call him while still him being like the godfather. So I don't.
Yeah.
He was a very close friend of the family, maybe in a more uncle than like godfather, but I'm not sure. I mean, I know there was like Robin Williams was definitely. And they did this. I think they did. The Robin Williams has a great documentary that kind of complements this on Max on HBO. It's called "Come Inside My Mind." And,
I've yet to see it.
And you do have a crossover moment where Christopher Reeve does pop up in there during the christening, so you get to see the christening ceremony, or like the whole he's there becoming the godfather to the kids. So anyway, so I think that's probably where they would say it. I don't know if it's like it went mutually exclusive or not, but I'm not sure. Because I think Gay Exton, I don't know if she would I think she probably would have had to co-sign it. Like, I don't know if she maybe just didn't co-sign, or they might have conceived and birthed in London because that's kind of where a lot of their relationship was. So I don't know.
Yeah.
So honestly, I think Brown's probably would have been, but I don't think assuming like they kept mainly in London. I don't know.
Yeah, of course.
Regardless, it always elates my heart to find out that Robin Williams was like the first visitor to Reeve when he was right after his accident. He's doing the old Russian proctologist bit, which I mean, he made him laugh. He was the first laugh that he got after this horrible thing happened to him, and the idea that every year after the accident, they would show up on the anniversary when it happened, like in October, and they would. Sorry, not October. Sorry, the end
That was
went in June. Yeah,
that was
yeah,
in. I think that was
May.
in. Was it? Was
It
it? Was
was.
it? It was. Yeah, it was May, wasn't it?
Yeah,
95.
unfortunately, it was my birthday. Yes,
Oh.
not the exact year. No, I just mean like the day, like May 27th. That's when. Yeah,
Okay. Well, you know, not to mention, if you don't mind me asking, like, I mean, were you born before or after Reeves's accident, Dragon?
before.
Okay. Yeah. Now and yeah, if I can mention this too, because like yeah, because like you know, every year on the the day of the accident, like Robin and his wife at the time, Marcia, who she too was, very close to the Reeve family and was very good friends with Dana Reeves, because yeah, both her and Robin, because like doing so much and love and such for the Reeves family and the party that they would throw, having this special chef and just yeah, just having it be a very positive party and celebration, and the fact, because the way I see it, and I think I make a good point where the way that they celebrated on the day of Reeves' accident, because Reeve didn't die when he had that accident. He lived, and even after he recuperated from that, but even though he became paralyzed, still he survived it. So if you get where I'm going with this, just yeah.
Yeah. No, for sure. It was a celebration of like, and the fact they didn't like talk about the accident. They just, it was
Yeah.
just good to be. And I love that we see an example of this party at the, right after like kind of a low point for Christopher Reeve, where basically he was unable to get off the ventilator, which really depressed him. So it's when Rob Williams show up and really bring him out of the funk.
Mm-hmm.
So also, again, the thing I found was really touching was Robin and Marshall Williams. They bought him the transportation van, like the chair,
Yeah.
like the handy capable van that basically took him to the Oscars. And I love that everyone in that room's clapping, but Robin Williams, because it's just kind of this show of respect, kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So
I mean,
overcome with the emotion.
yeah, you can even see, like, you could see it in Robin's face, just like the emotion that's going through him. And I mean, look, because everybody that's there, and because yeah, the whole thing, and yeah, we've already made our way into talking about the Oscars, because yeah, here's the fact that 1 year after Reeves' accident, he was asked to make an appearance at the Oscars, and at first, Christopher and the others, they were a bit worried, like if anything could happen specifically, and even yeah, because with what Reeve was worried about, if anything was to happen, like being out there on stage with all those people there, and the fact that the Oscars being broadcast to 2 billion people,
It would have
but
been detrimental. It would have been devastating if something bad happened to him. Like, oh god,
yeah,
it would have been pity.
yeah, and on live TV, but no, nothing like that happened, because what happened just yeah, he was perfectly okay, and you could see the look on his face, and just with everybody giving him a standing ovation. Just yeah, it was definitely a moment in Oscar history, I guess you could say. So
Yeah. Oh, for sure. It was again. The first public debut. He's surrounded by his peers. I do love clocking that. Nick Cage is there, of course. Huge Superman fan. Obviously, the whole the death
mhm.
of Superman Lives. Basically, in a sense, Nick Cage. He was the hopeful. I'm not going to say replacement, but he was the hopeful, like
No.
the next one to put on the suit. I mean, I'm saying that was what his hope was. He was looking forward to putting on the costume next and everything. This is around the time that was kind of in discussion too. So this was
Hmm.
so it's it's kind of very again it's very fitting that being naming his son like Cal and everything is just it's very appropriate that we see Nick Cage there as well as Robin Williams, like kind of the people inspired by and close to Reeves.
Oh yeah.
Um, and then just the beautiful, like, I wouldn't miss a welcome like this for the world, and it's just this led to the resurgence in the acting, but also the impetus of the gateway to helping people across the world.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, of course, speaking of which,
Yes.
with his we do cover Superman in this. We cover like the whole, like, how what went into the performance to make you believe a man could fly. We have I did get a little I got a little misty just because I was really saddened when Donner passed. So just
Mm.
getting Donner in there one more time just to talk about Christopher Reeve, and just like
Yeah.
he was genuinely, he was always like very much of, this is gonna sound weird, but I'm just gonna throw it out there because they're both
Okay.
gone. It's just, it always felt like Donner was kind of like the proud papa that Reeve never had.
Yeah, I would agree to that. And if I can, and I also feel like mentioning this, like, had if Donner still had been around, there's no doubt that he himself would have been a part of this documentary.
Oh, absolutely, without question. Yeah, I mean, he
Yeah.
was, again, like I said, like he Donner was always, he got very emotional about Reeve. Like when they did the segment on him for the box set for the Superman movies, you could tell he was fighting back tears when he was talking about Reeve.
Yeah,
It
especially
was, yeah.
since I was just gonna say, especially since, yeah, the footage that's shown of Donner, talking about Superman and talking about Reeve, and when mentioning that, he, Reeve made Donner believe that, a man can fly, and Donner mentioning that, he believes that, Reeve will walk again. Because, yeah,
Yeah,
obviously that footage of Dick Donner, like, that was obviously taken, after
yeah. That
Reeve.
was in the late '90s, Donner.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
I can only imagine, man. I can only imagine that, Dick Donner must have been devastated to hear what happened to Reeve.
oh, absolutely. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like their lives were so impacted by each other. Where he gave them, he gave him that big role. He took a chance on him. That was always the thing in the making of Superman. That it was this beautifully old Hollywood moment. That's the thing. Reeves has these old Hollywood moments in his life that are just there's utterly perfect, and just the idea that he goes in there, puts shoe polish in the hair and everything, and like Donner is like, he's like, look, kid, you'd really need, if you don't put on the weight, like to you bulk up to be sure, because he says, look, I used to be a real jock in high school. I can bulk up. I can do this. Like, give me a chance, sir. And he says, like, okay, look, kid, I'm going to take a chance on you here because if you don't, I'm really up a creek here. And he gave him his word, and he made good on it, and he impressed them all. And it was just this. Oh god, again, there's such like a fatherly kind of pride that Donner always felt talking about Christopher Reeve, and he would tell stories about, it, and it was always beautiful.
hmm I
Yeah,
mean, with the exception of Dick Donner, we do of course have what's his face, who was the producer of
we have Peter Spengler, who was the half of,
Yes.
we had Peter Spengler and Alexander Solkind, and let's be honest, okay, Peter Spengler, the less sleazy of the two. Let's be honest.
Wait, Alexander. Wait. Oh yeah, because yeah, only Spangler was in the documentary. Because despite Spangler and Donner having not gotten along, Spangler did admit gave a good compliment about Donner in the documentary, where where he complimented on Donner being very supportive and such over Reeve.
I mean, look, major kudos to Spengler. Spengler did say, he said, Superman 2 was not as good as Superman 1. That was a great admission on his part. So that to me, that kind of said, oh, that was kind of an admission of like, yeah, especially after losing Donner, probably it's like, you know what, we were wrong to push him around like we did. We were wrong to like fire him off that movie. Like without saying it so many words, it's basically saying, yeah, he knew what he was doing more than we did.
Yeah, and that's because, like, yeah, and when it would come to, say, Superman 3 and 4, with them firing Donner such, yeah, when it came to 3 and 4, it would come back to bite/haunt them.
Yeah.
And you see, you know what, I would have to, this is just me, and if you're on the same page too, Dragon, where I'd have to agree with Spangler, because, yeah, the first Superman film is a masterpiece. And for me, well, yeah, because the Superman 2 I prefer is Donner's cut. I'm
No,
sorry.
I'm with you. No question.
Yeah.
easily, and any day of the week. I gotta be honest. I won't watch the Richard Lester cut of Superman 2. I can't do it because
And now
I
that
just hate that we have like these dumb things that don't make much sense. And it's just, look, I'm not saying Reeve doesn't do a good job just with
okay,
the reshoots, but it's just not great.
okay, and right there with what you said, let me ask you this, Dragon, because now obviously for everyone, we first saw the theatrical cut of the theatrical version of Superman 2 before the Donner cut even existed. And
Yeah.
like, were you at that time, enjoy Superman 2 as it first turned out to be?
Well, no. Again, I'm watching Superman 2. I'm like, I'm still not liking it as much as the first one. I'm always like, oh man, the Superman kiss at the end is dumb, and like, why does
Yeah.
he fall into the fire pit? Like, these kind of things. And then, it's yeah, but then you look at the Donner cut. Donner cut's infinitely better. The biggest problem, one of the biggest issues, that they cut the most pivotal scene. Like, how does he get his powers back? Which is the dumbest thing that is missing in the theatrical cut of 2.
And and here's another thing, because over on the Little Blue channel, because I've been reviewing a lot of Superman films because I've been doing a Superman review marathon. I reviewed the Donner cut. That's the one I reviewed. But I even pointed this out in my review of Superman 2, the Donner cut. I've even shared this with my parents, and I'm sharing this with you too, Dragon. The way I see it and how I put at it with both versions of Superman 2. When we watch Superman 2, the Donner cut, after having watched it, there is no going back watching the theatrical version of Superman 2 the way you did before.
I would agree, because there's something far more superior, and even in the unfinished Donner cut.
There you go. I think, and you know what? Because I think in the Donner cut, I mean, look, despite the Donner cut having some stuff here and there, but you know what?
Well, I don't care if it's the skinny Christopher Reeve with the shoe polish. I don't care, because we still have that scene with the gun where it's like that. Hey, Clark Kent would have died with a blank. Which is great.
Yeah, besides, and you can argue the fact that probably because it was all happening too fast for Superman, because he didn't have the full knowledge that it was a blank gun. But also, not to mention that, the fact that there are different shots where we have Christopher Reeve with big hair, but also short hair. But also, when it came to the whole spinning the Earth backwards, I think that makes a little bit better sense than, say, the mind scrambling kiss.
Yeah, I mean, look, yes, I will admit that. Okay, well, we're getting a little off track with old Superman 2, but let's round it out with this.
Right.
Look, yes, with the spinning the Earth back. One, it's always been a cool effect when he spins the Earth back.
Yeah.
So get that out there. Secondly, look, yes, it's a bit of a retread, but look, even if it's a retread, one, we understand why it's a retread, because that was the original end of 2, and it was just kind of like, what if, it was a placeholder ending that they had, and they kind of had to scramble because the Spaniards demanded we have to put the Earth turning back in 1 because it's the most impressive effect. So it was a demand by the Soul Kinds that they had to cave to, which does serve the first movie well, but they would have come up with something better had he not been fired off the movie. All right, so let's throw that out there. And, again, it was the best of a bad situation, but again, even as is, just taking it on its own, yes, it's like him doing the same thing again, but it is far better than like the amnesia kiss.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. So
okay.
With the original Superman movie that we kind of spend some time on here, we do talk about, we have Matt Reeve talking about the scene, the most definitive scene in all of Superman, that Christopher Reeve, the magic trick that he performed in '78 that we all still marvel at, that is like the marking of like what makes a good Superman. He legitimized the glasses with Clark Kent in a moment, an instant before our eyes, going from Clark Kent to Superman, and then back to Clark.
Yeah, that was and Matt was right about that whole thing, because where Superman is, in the film, Superman's technically playing a character, which being Clark, and just it's amazing how in the film Superman just goes like at one moment goes as himself, and the way he acts, but he then just can't help it and just get straight back into character as Clark Kent. Like this, that attention to detail and with what Christopher delivered to that is just so good.
Yeah.
And besides, Christopher was taking this very seriously, because at that time in the late 1970s, and it's established in the documentary, this was kind of like a brand new thing, and there hadn't been really anything like this, and people thought this would just be a flat out joke. Even Spangler mentioning an executive producer at Warner Brothers who would not be named. Said that this will never be made as a movie. But but especially Reeve, and now obviously the same goes for Donner. They were taking this very seriously, and because Reeve treated the movie and with the title character he was playing like art, and not to mention that even Bill Hurt thought that this was a mistake. Like he told Reeve right away after Reeve told him that he was going to audition for Superman, just this is selling, don't do this. But Reeve, he was very insistent. He just like, no, I'm going to do this. And it's really cool because they even quickly mentioned this, that the late David Prowse, the body performance of Darth Vader, he specifically helped train Christopher Reeve and getting him into shape for the role of Superman.
That's right, kids. It took Darth Vader was Superman's gym buddy.
Yep, and even David Prowse also going by Mr. Universe.
Oh yeah. So with that, another really great edit we had was just this great realization of so when we have the rehab and the and kind of the working towards a cure kind of like elements of the movie, like the montage. We parallel it to the David Prowse training to become Superman. So it's this great it's almost like a muscle memory of hope of he did it once, maybe he can do it again, like in a different form, but maybe that was the driving thing of hope. He went from the beanpole to the Man of Steel. Maybe he can go from his current state to being able to walk again. It's at least possible. He used to be able to lift more than his own body weight, before, and he weighed like 200 plus pounds.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry, Zach. I was muted for a second. And by the way, because Kogios left off a couple more comments, I wonder if whether or not Christopher Reeve and Kevin Conroy ever met each other.
Sadly, no.
Really? They never met in person?
Never met in person, no.
Nor even, say, when they were first at Juilliard School?
That's the thing. I don't know if it was either this. They were just in different. There might have been missed each other by a year, or they were just in different classes. It just didn't they did not. They either just miss each other by a year, but they went to the same place. But no, they did not. They did not encounter each other.
Yeah, and I actually, because before he brought that up, I just quickly realized, because that does depend on if Kevin was there at the time Reeve was there, and as you said, they were probably in different classes. Probably, but it's a shame that because they never met in person. But
it would have been the most epic thing ever if they'd been old college buddies. It would have been.
And before they were those two iconic DC characters.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And also, Kogios also says, as a kid, I mistakenly thought that Christopher Reeve was secretly related to George Reeves.
I kind of had the same thing as a kid too, where I thought it was so similar, and then they both were Superman. It would have been a really cool, a coincidence. But yeah, it would have been. Yeah. But again, also just credit where credit's due. George Reeves, again, also a wonderful Superman who is very late. He had kind of a different. It's so interesting. These two actors had such a different experience with Superman, where there was a connect of the impact that they had on people. By the same token, though, George Reeves had a much more negative kind of history with Superman than Christopher Reeve did. Christopher Reeve had a thing where he did face some typecast. It was less typecasting; it was more he wasn't able to escape the shadow of Superman, and then we kind of explore that with his first, well, not marriage, but his first relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And he the presumption is that it was it had a lot to do with his career was not taking off the way he had hoped after he basically becomes the biggest star in the world, and everything he does outside Superman, it's ambitious, it's creatively fulfilling, and it's given him like great variety of roles, which is what he wanted. But it's not really. He still has to begrudgingly do a Superman 3 and a Superman 4, and it just kind of weighed on the marriage. Well, I keep saying marriage. It weighed on the relationship. That was a whole thing because he was unmarried with Gay X, and they had 2 kids together. Which, by the
Yeah.
way, had those kids during Superman. Had Matt during Superman 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and because to quickly, and also coming back to Kogias to finish on what he commented, because what else he commented? He also says, "I love that Nicolas Cage was there, considering his own history regarding Superman."
Yeah.
And he also, and actually, the next comment down below, I think this would have been awesome, where he says, it would have been cool to have Michael Keaton in the documentary because he and Christopher Reeve were both in a film called Speechless, and they're both iconic parts of superhero film history, and that is very true because they were in this film that actually came out. It was one of those. It was one of Reeve's last films of 1995 where he was still walking and such, and yeah, because he co-starred alongside with Batman himself, Michael Keaton, and yeah, that's pretty much, to think of this. That's the only time we would ever see Michael Keaton and Christopher Reeve in a movie together, but not as Batman and Superman.
I tell you, I've met in person. I've begged and pleaded with the writer of the Superman 78 comics. Well, the Superman. Well, yeah, they say 78 because it takes place after the Donner films in the era. So they haven't they didn't basically they ruled Superman 3 and 4 out of continuity. Basically, they did the continuation comic.
Mm-hmm.
That basically takes the Christopher Reeve Donner Superman and kind of theorizes where we would go with them, where Donner might have gone with them next. It's great. They're great stuff. Anyway, so I every time I see him, it's like, okay, oh man, it'd be really great if they let you cross over with the '89, the Batman '89 comic that they've been doing, and he just it's
Yeah.
not. He says he's down for it, but they haven't given him the okay.
This is a missed opportunity, especially in the world of comic books.
Yeah.
Well, I hope we can only hope that will one day happen.
Yeah, one day, hopefully.
Yeah. But Dragon, let me quickly ask you this: have you seen because of course they're out there on YouTube? Have you seen fan edit trailers of the combination of Christopher Reeve as Superman and Michael Keaton as Batman? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a bunch of those kind of trailers. I've probably seen a few of them. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they're pretty good. So yeah, just
I
felt
mean, they also used to put them on the TV guide covers and stuff. Like for example, you had Keaton Batman and John Wesley Shipp Flash. So you had kind of things like that. I think one cover may have done the big four was the three of them, Linda Carter, Wonder Woman. So
yeah. Yeah, because most of the time not every time, but I've seen where they would have Christopher Reeve Superman and Linda Carter's Wonder Woman combined, right next with say Adam West's Batman. But I think
yeah.
more appropriately it should be Reeve and Carter with Keaton. So.
Well, I think one of the coolest things I ever saw was Alex Ross did did an artwork of the Adam West Batman Robin with George Reeves Superman, which to
Yes,
me, now mind you, they've
I've
done.
seen that.
Now let me ask you this real quick. Okay, real quick, we gotta get back to it.
Go ahead.
Did you ever read the Batman 66 Wonder Woman 77 comic crossover?
Well, here's the thing, because I did have a kind of a good chunk, not enough, but quite good chunk of those comics that are of the '60s Batman. But no, I never got my hands. Nor did I think I've seen it at my local Books a Million or something like that. Where point being, I never found and nor have ever had a copy of the crossover comic with Wonder Woman with '60s Batman.
Yeah, it's worth checking out, man. It's fantastic. It's three eras of basically Batman and Wonder Woman interacting with each other, and because she's an Amazon, she doesn't age at all, and we just kind of how where Batman
Right.
does age. So we have like
Hmm.
three eras. You have like Batman as a kid with the '40s Wonder Woman. You have then of course there's kind of the straightforward '60s '70s kind of era, and then we have
Hmm.
the dark, basically the '60s version of Dark Knight Returns Batman
Yeah.
interacting with a Wonder Woman kind of a little later. And the point being, with that in mind, that was the other thing I would kill to see, because as a kid I've always wanted to see like the '60s Batman interact with maybe a slightly aged George Reeve Superman, which we could do in comic form. It would be awesome. Like I would love to think that maybe the George Reeves Superman maybe becomes a little bit more like Fleischer Superman or something. I don't know. It would have been really cool.
Yeah, and I do want to quickly mention this, just very, 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 very quickly. But like, obviously, yeah, this not being brought up in the documentary. And Dragon, I don't know if you heard about this, because I once read an article where apparently at one point, I think probably this was like, yeah, in the late '80s or something, and I think after Batman '89 came out, where Christopher Reeve himself, he apparently at one point went to Warner Brothers and he pitched an idea of a cinematic universe or something where his Superman and Michael Keaton's Batman would be in the same universe, and apparently Warner Brothers just flat out laughed in Reeves' face. Now, I don't know if by any chance you might have heard of this, but I swear, because I remember reading an article about this.
I don't know if they laughed in his face. I know.
Well, I guess to clarify, like, not like laugh at his face. I'm just saying that they just found it, like, as a hilarious joke. Like, oh, are you kidding? Like, that's ridiculous. That's impossible.
Well, that's it. I don't recall that I don't recall that happening. But here's what I can tell you. Okay, so
Hmm.
Superman 4 is kind of a bittersweet time in Christopher Reeve's life, as we kind of see here. Because basically, Superman 4 was kind of like on one point, like he's bringing his daughter to set for like Superman 4, and she cameos in the movie as like the little girl that he
Yeah.
saved. So, I mean, it's kind of like you have that going on for it. It's like dad and seeing dad in the costume, like, oh, isn't that cute? But, the same token, though, this is Reeve on kind of a downward slope where he does Superman 4 so he can make Street Smart with Morgan Freeman. That's why he does that movie. So
Hmm.
Reeve I don't know how much of that might have been like Reeve. He did have story. He had a lot of story input on 4. I know. I don't think he ended up directing 4, but he wanted to direct 4, and I think
He
I think,
did.
yeah. Wait, he did direct, or he wanted to?
Well, he wanted to, but if I'm correct, if I'm using the right words, he was like too inexperienced or something like
Yeah.
that. But
I think
even,
it's always
yeah,
a joke of like, oh yeah, he's inexperienced because he can't. He needs someone to say yes. That's why I said experience, you dope. you know.
yeah. But he did direct. I forget the specific term, but he did direct some shots, or I can't remember the specific word, but he did do somewhat of a bit of directing on Superman 4.
Gotcha. Well, anyway, so the point being, I don't know how much of that might have been a bittersweet thing of Reeve would have been proposing ideas so we can keep working, and because maybe so we can get other projects off the ground, or just like plus also maybe redeem how bad he knew how bad Superman 4 was, and
Oh yeah.
it always breaks my heart when I hear that Tom Mankiewicz, the wonderful writer who basically was he was like kind of the secret sauce in the writing department for he didn't do he wasn't Mario Puzo wrote the original draft, but then they had to like strip out a lot of the stuff that didn't work in Puzo's draft, or like kind of adapt and massage out, like because he wrote like a really long giant script, and a lot of it had campy jokes in it and stuff like that. Anyway, so
Yeah.
the point being, Tom Mankiewicz was the same. He and Don are like they were friends. Tom Mankiewicz is like descended from Herman Mankiewicz, who wrote Citizen Kane. Anyway,
Mhm.
so Tom Mankiewicz, he very much added. He was like integral to the whole like you will believe a man can fly. He was the reason the love story works the way it does. He and Donner kick around ideas. He was very invaluable to what made that movie that movie. And Christopher Reeve, respecting Tom Mankiewicz's opinion, he asked him like he pitched him the idea for Superman 4, looking for some guidance and just kind of some pointers. And Tom Mankiewicz gave him some very
Yes.
wise advice. Unfortunately, Reeves didn't adhere to, but because he didn't really have a choice, though, he had to go with whatever he did the best he could. He basically went with kind of a half baked idea. The half baked idea foundationally sounds great, but Tom Mankiewicz pointed out that the whole like ridding the world nuclear weapons, which was very topical at the time they made that movie, while a good idea, there's no out for that story. You're falling into you writing yourself into a corner. If Superman can do that, he can do anything. And plus, where's your conflict? Unfortunately, the conflict was in a Chippendales, like, Bizarro Superman ripoff. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So anyway, point being, so I guess Reeves, the Reeves family life here. So Gay Exton, they met on on the original Superman movie. She thought it was Jaws from behind, which is kind of adorable because they did shoot on the James Bond.
Richard Keel.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because they were shooting on the James Bond stage, so it makes sense. Elstree, so it makes sense. And they had two kids together, but sadly the relationship over time it kind of fell through. In that he would have to. I think the presumption was he would have to go back to America a lot to kind of for his career, and it's a lot of distance between him and Reeves. He didn't tough it out as he kind of wished his father would, and kind of promised he would never he never wanted his kids to grow up in a broken home. And it's not that it's not broken, but it was kind of maybe fractured. Let's say like a crack in the glass, not. So I was always bitter pill to swallow, I'm sure. Let's see.
Well, not to mention that when he and Gail were in a relationship, this for a while it caught, and of course it's brought up in the documentary where for a while and when they were in a relationship, it basically started for a while some controversy. The fact that because they're in a relationship, they have kids, and they're not married. So
yeah.
I mean,
it does. So Matt Reeve had a really good perspective on this.
Mm-hmm.
He said, that he admitting his father's faults, and I love this. Again, it's the whole thing, like kind of like we have with the Mister Rogers documentaries. That it's important to show these guys as much as we're lauding them, as much as we love them, much as they're icons. They're not not that they're not saints, but they're not like literally they're not deified. They're not they're not like beyond reproach. It's the fact they're humans, and the fact that he brings up that his father, he was non-committal. He was kind of not a playboy. He was a bon vivant. He lived life. He charmed people. He was as like we say later on with someone mentioned his reputation when he was dating Dana Reeve. Before that point was Dana was he was a love him and leave him type. That was the warning. So that's the thing. He was non-committal. That was his fatal flaw. He was non-committal, and maybe because of the broken family he grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of carried on.
Yeah.
So deep down, it was always like, he was always, when working, he didn't really have to, face like, kind of fully, settling down. He loved being with the kids, but by the same token, he called his own son calls out that, after we were born, he went skiing with buddies. Yeah. It's not the worst thing because what's he going to do? But by the same token, though, it's like, you kind of want to be there for like the first week.
Yep. Of course.
All right. So the point being, within the struggles of Christopher Reeve, we see the struggles and kind of the groundswell of support that we have the very humbling and humanizing component of within his rehabilitation. He's in the hospitals. He's in the care centers for a while, and he's I love the story of him inspiring the kid to try and wean off the ventilator.
Uh-huh.
Where he's basically, he's basically mingling. Sorry, I'm just kind of getting distracted by this earlier thought I wanted to bring up, which I think I should probably bring into it now. That I love in our narrative, we show like there's like a bitter irony that we don't draw a lot of focus to, but I think it really kind of pays off here. That he did the movie Above Suspicion before his accident, which basically is about a man faking paralysis.
Yeah.
And it's kind of this question of fate, and like through rehab, he meets fellow disabled patients and inspires the kid, and he basically, it's kind of where the idea is forming. I could do something even from the confines of the chair. I could be an advocate here, and it's just really heartwarming. All the fan letters and the well wishes from celebrities and people and politicians and presidents and like everything. It's just all these. It's just it's nice, and he turned this negative into a potential a positive. We found, and with the whole Christopher Reeve Foundation, which I remember this guy from that featurette, and I love seeing more of him here. Michael Manganello. Michael Manganello is a friend of Dana Reeves from college, and basically he was tasked with helping be one of the main guys that run the foundation, and a wonderful human being. This guy,
Mm-hmm.
I thought. Yeah, I mean, I love that he was kind of the bridge between, Christopher and Dana Reeve. Ultimately, it was kind of him kind of stepping up in this big moment. I love that he really takes up for Christopher Reeve. I've always really appreciated that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You want to take us anywhere?
Well, I mean, yeah, because like I did want to mention this
Yeah,
where,
sure. Go ahead.
well, I mean, I was just gonna say because like back to like yeah, where Gale and Reeves their relationship and where yeah, eventually, well, for Reeve because he especially felt that it just wasn't gonna work out and this really hit Gale hard. Even like when she herself in the documentary brings it up, and she starts to cry. Just yeah, I mean, it's obvious that, and when it happened, it was very devastating for her. But it was what it was, and for what Reeve especially felt deep down, not that he like I'm sure though like yeah, not that he intentionally meant to hurt Gale. It's just what he was sensing, personally. And even if Gale might have felt some of it too, but at the same time, in later on, because like things seemed to turn out fine, and even like very later on, even after Reeves' fatal accident, you know, he and Gale, they got along pretty well, So, and like the like still a one big happy family with the addition of Gale, and of course with Alexandra and Matthew, just always and very later on still being with their father, being in peril, just yeah, and yeah, and because like that I didn't know of. Where the one film you brought up, and that's brought up in the film, where one of the films that he was in, one of the other last films he was in 1995, where um, Dragon. What's the name of the movie again? Where he pretending to be on a wheelchair and such.
Above suspicion.
Yeah. So yeah, that because that I didn't really know of until this documentary talked about it. And man, like talk about an eerie coincidence, especially when it's explained that Reeve had to be taught how someone in a wheelchair does this and that and that, and to think that he would get to experience something like that when he did become paralyzed. It is definitely beyond eerie and spooky. So
Yeah. All right. Let's see. So, just to talk about the foundation with Christopher Reeve Foundation, I love that. Yeah, I'm going to get maudlin here, but I really respect like a charitable institution that
hmm
really does put the money where it says it's going to. Like my grandfather, very religiously, he without fail, he donated to St. Jude's, because the big sell was that the money did go directly to the children and the families. That it went like straightforward. There wasn't a lot of BS of like it has to fund like wings of hospitals and stuff. It was they went directly to the research and helping the kids.
hmm
So with that in mind, I love how Chris Reeve Foundation. I've always had great respect for it because of this. That it did go directly to the research, and then of course eventually the quality of life as well. But mainly the first and foremost it was like the research, and we see here. And I love that we really kind of put it like on Front Street. That Chris Reeve he backed stem cell research. He was focused on getting the word out. That was like because he
hmm
knew that the potential lied there, and ultimately we kind of proved that it really did. Um, and then, of course, this led to the infamous ad that kind of bolster stem cell research. And I love that at this point he's having done having done a lot of advocacy work, and also having gotten this groundswell like from people on the left and the left to the right side politically, just anyone in between, everyone rallied behind him and everyone supported him. And we even had this great scene in the movie, and I thought this was fantastic, where we intercut between kind of a scene, like the one really good scene from Superman 4, let's be honest, of Superman, going to the UN and basically, telling him how he's going to rid the world of nuclear weapons.
Yep.
And and then again, so we've kind of taken the set piece there of like him standing in costume to Christopher Reeve commanding all the respect in the room as he's talking about like the doing right by the American family, essentially, or the family unit, family values. I think that's specifically what he said. And basically, again, he was rallies so much support and all this funding that he then put into the right places, and to the cause. And just, I love how all that went down. How we just we visualized that. So anyway, so he does all that, and as our kind of our tail end of the sequence here is the infamous ad where he drew a lot of controversy. Whereas basically we used it's relevant now because essentially it's kind of like this is not it per se. It's kind of the old AI thing we're kind of dealing with now to a degree. It's the whole it's we've created something false through kind of digital trickery that people have opinions about. Only here it was a lot more early rudimentary, and it was a little bit more of like I've always kind of looked at it glass half full, where it's like this is absolutely what Reeve wants to do. It gets you in the feels. It's like this is possible. You want it to happen. So I mean, you're absolutely like rooting for it. But as we kind of see, a lot of people feel that they felt it was false hope, or was kind of like a self the assertion that it was self indulgence, that it was self interest, not self indulgence. That Reeve wanted to, he wanted to get out of his chair first and foremost. Like the old adage was like Reeve wanted to, like it was a cure 'em or kill 'em philosophy, which it's not true. It's the fact that it was he had a humbling experience, and it was just kind of opened his eyes to this whole to like we if we don't essentially if we don't it's not that we don't give up, but if we don't like reside ourselves to this, and we open ourselves to the possibility that we could change instead of like it's like there's acceptance, which they said that he doesn't he never accepted just like handicapable life, because he was burning through. He had a lot of resources a lot of people didn't have. He was going through his care was like running 400K a year, and with an insurance cap. That's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
He anyway, so I don't know. It was just I always fascinated me the fact that they would get a negative response, and it's kind of the thing where like in the days we find ourselves in, it's like you're never going to please everybody, and it's never just going to be like this groundswell of support, because that would just be the easy end of the story. Everyone gets on board, and they back this play where it's like they're calling out false hope, and just this wonderful biting response from the very saintly Christopher Reeve, like, there's no false hope, there's just hope. And that's such a wonderful way of distilling that down. Like, yes, it's what hope is. Superman's telling us what hope is.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, so Dana
Yeah.
swooped in. She really kind of pulled him out of the fire here, where she basically said, well, they do kind of have a point in which we could be doing more for the people who don't want to wait around for the chance that things are going to work out. We should do something in the meantime, which would be the
Yeah.
quality of life stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And obviously we have to of course talk about Dana. Do we want to go ahead and talk more about Dana?
Yeah, talk about Dana, man. Yeah, go for it.
All right, put me on the spot on Dana, but yeah. So, well, because at some point when it comes to Dana fully, well, because how the beginnings of when like say Reeves and Dana would cross paths. Well, just so happened to be that same year when the fourth and final Superman film came out. It just so happens at one point that Reeve happened to be at this show or something where he happened to be catching a performance that Dana was doing where she was singing, and somehow and with what the documentary specifically states, where because they first met there, where Dana was performing and singing. They locked eyes, and it didn't take them that long to meet each other. And even like say when they would go on their first date, and the way that it's described and how what their first date was like, just like it was in the evening time, and just the moon and them having their first kiss. Like yeah, it's interesting with what's described about their first date, but at the same time very very romantic. And yeah, because boy, Christopher being so lucky finding Dana, well, for that matter, because how lucky both of them were to have found one another. And even when like as they enter their son Will Reeve, and how much of an incredible lady she was, a wife and mother. And just with what all this documentary says about Dana, and over the years, and even after Christopher had his fatal accident, just oh man, yeah, definitely Dana being up there as one of the most generous, amazing women of our time. Just but and Dragon, I'm sure you'll have plenty to say about Dana, but yeah, might as well now turn over to you. So
Yeah, so Dana Reeve just there was the way we depicted in this movie. It's sincerely just a very romantic and beautiful affair. They're instantly smitten. It's an old fashioned love story. Just you know again, it's like this is the relationship that kind of motivated, took work, but it motivated Reeve to kind of commit and eventually marry her. And they were both
yeah.
just I love seeing all the families completely united across. I love like we made the very deliberate point of like Dana said the gay ex and like, look, I'm not going to be. I just want to be their friends. I don't want to be the
Yeah.
stepmom. I don't want to like take anything away from you, which is a really respectful gesture.
Hmm.
And just the fact that she was an angel of a woman with this smile that lit up her room, and you can see it like all throughout like the home video footage.
Hmm.
And again, presumably she's the reason for the home movies. I would like to think, but
Probably.
yeah, I gotta be honest. Like at this stage of the movie, I just love seeing him with the kids, and love seeing him like the whole like Matt like calling his dad a dork, while and like him embarrassing the kids in like an adorable home movie kind of way. It's like precious moments of life, and again from that, and the fact we're jumping around so much in the movie that we can.
We are.
Well, not I mean the movie itself, the non-linear style. Yeah,
Yeah,
we're
because well, basically, just like this, I didn't really expect. Where the documentary, like, it just goes back and forth, like, between Reeves' fatal accident, the aftermath of his accident, but also at the same time, we go back and forth. We also cut to what Reeve was doing, in the late '70s and '80s. Just yeah, the way that this documentary does it, it's one of those documentaries where yeah, it has the way that the pacing is done, and we go back and forth on certain things.
yeah. Anyway, so it's just it's just really lovely to see things when everything was just kind of basically in that kind of that pre-New Year's kind of period for them. Everything was just going great for them. But again, it's also really Dana went through a lot. We she put
Hmm.
everything she had into her marriage, into her family, and into everything, even the kids that weren't even hers. She was
Yeah.
it's just an absolutely wonderful human being. And again, with the Christopher Reeve Foundation, it's called the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation for a reason. She again she did a lot to help people, and the thing that breaks my heart in all the right ways is Will Reeve. By the way, again, loving the inclusion of like the kids like very much. They have absolutely every right. I'm so glad like they were comfortable enough to be in the documentary and kind of regale us with these events, and it feels so personal and so cathartic for them. And we see them break down in these moments, and it's very again it's like something that kind of separate. I don't know. It's just something. It's kind of that kind of that magic spark that's just kind of in here, where it just feels like we've been welcomed into the Reeve family like for about an hour and 40 minutes, and just Will Reeve reading like his mother's like poetry that she wrote, and the idea that she would like hug a warm towel for the human contact she can't really fully get from her husband.
Hmm.
It's the fact she didn't like had no complaints, nothing. It's just like, but that's what she had.
Yeah.
Now, I want to talk about the moment I was from the beginning of the documentary. When I saw it for the first time. I was itching to get to this part because I had seen a Christopher Reeve documentary before this movie. It's called Hope in Motion, which is the name of like one of his books as well. And essentially, there and always I was always jaw dropped by something I never knew about Christopher Reeve, which was there were signs of improvement towards the end. I had no idea about that, and I was eager with the narrative that we had built up and the way we've been telling this story. Like that's gonna be oh my god, it's gonna be gut wrenching when we get to that part, and that's gonna be like again with the whole like everything's kind of paying off for him, and like how are we gonna get from there to where we go next, and just the way we did it was the idea that again the love that he had for Dana in a sense was like just in casual conversation with I'm just so frustrated I can't just pointing, and he actually pointed. It's like, dear God, like it's he's starting to regain mobility. The fingers moving. We have the eject. I think it's so freaking adorable that Matt Reeve built like an ejector button under his father's chair so we could, the incentive of like move that finger again so you can eject yourself out of that chair and walk again, buddy. It's like yes,
Yeah.
you know. But then of course the thing I remember from that, so the finger was one thing, but I always remember the him in the pool, like the pool being part of his his self care regimen, which was like we saw the legs moving and the arms moving on their own, slowly but surely. It's like again, I was getting emotional in the theater a little bit, like because a little bit, or not as much as the later bit, but just like, oh my god, he was so close, he was doing it, and it was like this electric moment
Well,
of victory and
I mean,
rallying catharsis.
yeah, I mean, yeah, because like from his legs and his, well, I think it started with his fingers, and then came his legs. So,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, it's a shame where it seemed like a ray of hope where it was coming. It was start like he was starting to move some, and it could have, if only this could have proceeded further, had if Christopher Reeve had still been doing pretty good and his conditions not have gotten worse and worse. Just it's really a shame.
Well, as Michael Manganello kind of summarizes there, it's like he was improving, but the poor guy he couldn't get off the ventilator. That was always like the
Yeah.
thing that really held him back. It was like literally the string that he couldn't cut. That was and he could see him. It's really heartbreaking. This as we kind of see for a bit, like what he's talking about. Like it was hard to watch where he was trying, but he just couldn't do it.
Hmm.
So, real quick, before we kind of get towards the end, the big ending beats of our story here, Kogas has some interesting comments here. He says,
Yeah, he does.
I looked up to my grandfather as if he were Superman. One of my fondest memories is him taking me to see Superman Returns. I mean, Kogas, I can absolutely relate. My grandfather actually, he was my hero. I said movies were our connection. He showed me the classics and everything. Now, mind you, he and I, in regards to Superman, he was not the introduction to Donner Superman, but he was very much he and I would quote lines from Donner Superman because he loved Gene Hackman, so he loved the Superman movie for that reason. And Brando, he loved The Godfather. That was one of his all favorite movies. So he loved the fact that Brando was in the movie and Gene Hackman was in the movie, and we'd always quote like because me being steeped in the making of it and everything, always the lines and everything could be like it's amazing the human mind can generate enough power to keep those legs moving.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. The whole Otisburg. He and I would quote Otisburg to each other like forever. Just yeah. He always loved quoting movie lines just randomly, and that was like one that would come up often. Whenever Superman came up, it was like Otisburg.
Yep.
It was very vaudeville, very Abbott and Costello, which was another kind of passion of ours. But anyway,
Hmm.
so then he says, I could be wrong. But I don't think that everyone's hero was brought up. And it was co-directed by Christopher Reeve, and my dad took me to see it, cheer me up after my grandfather's passing. So yeah, There are a few. I'm with you, Code Geass, that yeah, everyone's hero wasn't. There were two things that didn't get brought up in this movie. I was kind of bummed out they weren't there, but again, I was so satisfied with everything else. Didn't quite matter, and they were trying to keep story
Mm-hmm.
targeted to the Superman specific kind of stuff. But then, we had the Brooke Ellison thing because the Brooke Ellison thing is very crucial. But everyone's hero kind of goes hand in hand with the Brooke Ellison thing. These were kind of the last things that he really did. But
Yeah.
so yeah, everyone's hero, which feature Robin Williams in it. It's a baseball movie. Have
Mm-hmm.
you seen Everyone's Hero?
I've still yet to see it, but I have been very well aware of that movie. I remember seeing the trailers and I think the TV promos, but yeah, even still to this day and as of the stream, I have still I've still yet to watch it, but at some point I'm going to. So
Yeah, so I mean, I was always, I remember as a kid, I was kind of shocked seeing that Christopher Reeve, you did it, but 'cause that was like
well,
a
yeah,
red
both
button.
both even Dana Reeves was also involved in it too.
Oh yeah. So let's say
Oh,
okay. So
well, I was just gonna just very quickly. Kogios also brought this up early on, which I didn't. Yeah, I can't. Okay, he brought up saying this where, and in fact, I meant to mention this where he said, "I would love to see George Reeves get a documentary too, if he hasn't already gotten one."
well, he's got a biopic that well, he's got a biopic, but not a documentary. You're right though. Documentary would
Oh,
be rather welcome.
oh, what's? I don't think I've been. I don't think I've until now. I've been aware of that. There's a biopic of George Reeves. Well, I take it you've seen it, Dragon.
Yeah, no, I've seen it. It's here's the thing. It's a biopic, but he's not quite the star of his own biopic, which I found to be a questionable choice.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's Hollywoodland.
Oh, okay.
So that's
But
Adrian. It's all about George. It's about the death of George Reeves, which does feature a few moments where we recreate. We put him in. It's Ben Affleck plays. Oddly enough, Ben Affleck plays George Reeves in that movie. George Reeves in
oh,
that movie.
cool. Well, and I take it that well, and I take it. You know what? I think I've seen that before. I think I've seen like maybe one or two photos of because I presume in the biopic wake we do get like a few moments where we see Ben Affleck portraying George
Yeah.
Reeves in the Superman getup.
Oh yeah. There's one. They have one scene where he's in the costume, and the scene that he's in well, two scenes. One where they fit him for the costume, and then one he's in the finished costume. He does like a essentially did like a promotional event where it's like kind of like I don't know if it was like literally a kid's birthday party or not, but essentially this is based on a real story and it was great. Yes, the man who played Batman
I
played
was
the
going to
man who
mention
played.
that. I was going to mention that. That's a huge coincidence.
Oh yeah. Anyway, like from real life, George Reeves. Sorry, now I'm getting my Reeves and Reeves thing confused. But
Yeah.
well, we're talking about both of them simultaneously, so forgive me, folks.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Well, that's
so
true.
George Reeves did like this event, and he would do these things a lot. Because the kids love Superman, so he did this thing for the kids, and a kid secretly grabbed his father's handgun.
Oh my God.
And what happened was, and the way they shoot the movie, I assume it's maybe the same make and model of gun, but they could have stretched it on that. I don't know if it was like point being, it looked like a classic like 6 shooter. They have like the 6 bullets in the chamber kind of thing. So that's how basically the movie shows that's how Reeves can see that there's a bullet in the gun and he's concerned.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, the kid's like asking very politely, he's like, "Hey, Superman, can I shoot you with my dad's gun?" And this is a very tense situation where the way the movie frames it, mind you, it's the way they do it in the movie is it is based on a real event and it pretty much happens the way it happened in real life, but they end it with kind of like a bit of a nightmare. The Adrian Brody private investigator character is like thinking about the stuff that he's learned about Reeves, so it ends on kind of like a little bit of a nightmare thing where it's like the trigger never got pulled, but we kind of pull it for dramatic effect to wake him out of the nightmare. But in real life, in the way they depict the movies, the kid is like pulling the gun on him, asking if he can shoot. It's a tense situation. George Reeves, he acts his way out of the situation where he says, "Well, look, you don't want that bullet, bouncing off me and hitting somebody, do you?"
Yeah.
That's how he saved everyone, which is
Mm-hmm.
incredible.
Yeah, and ironically, because like how George Reeves passed away is like a total mystery. Where apparently, because he was found shot to death at his home in Hollywood in California, and to this day there is still controversy over whether he killed himself or was murdered.
I still think it was. I think it was mob involved. I think. I don't think it was suicide.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there would have been signs that something was going through George, but clearly there wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, well, the main thing, honestly, the reason I the reason I think it was foul play is that Jack Larson, the man who played Jimmy Olsen,
Mm-hmm.
he tells the firsthand account in which he showed up and the mob affiliate girlfriend was there and she kind of knew where the bullets were, and it was like this thing where I'm not doing it justice, but the way he tells it, it was kind of like a chilling thing where he kind of like he could suspect that she knew a lot more than she was letting on, and it was like I don't the way he tells it. I think if anyone looks into it, like the last days of George Reeves, I think you can find on YouTube somewhere. Like you hear Jack Larson tell the tale, like when he was like
Yeah.
on the scene, it was like it was eerie.
Yeah.
So, but that compared with like the factors Eli's bringing up here and some of the other stuff, I think there's evidence to suggest it was it was kind of like they didn't want to probe further into the matter, but anyway.
Yeah.
The point that George Reeves does have an interesting story that would make for a great documentary. It would have to be the inverse of this documentary, which would have been really interesting. I won't lie to you, but it's not exactly the feel good piece of the year.
Nope.
Okay. So anyway, so the other what I was trying to mention.
Mm-hmm.
So Kogi S. Anime fan, he brought up everyone's here. So the other thing that kind of broke my heart, it wasn't in there. I was hoping to see it, but I mean, we don't need it, I guess, was his appearance on Smallville, I think.
Yeah.
There's two things with his appearance on Smallville. One, again, look, again, I can't say I'm the authority on Smallville, but I will say that episode that he appears in is like the reason to watch Smallville, is like just getting to that moment, because that's like it was like the passing of the torch. It was Christopher Reeve being able to be the guy through the way they decided to tell the Smallville story of like how Clark Kent learns that he's Kryptonian.
Mm-hmm.
And he basically gets to read the Jor-El kind of like the message of like please something that's tantamount to they can be a great people, Kylo. They only lack the light to show the way.
Yeah.
It's a big moment. It's very wonderfully acted. We bring back the John Williams score under that scene, which it's magical. It's fantastic, and it's also, I mean, behind the scenes when Christopher Reeve was on set. Tom Welling told the story in which Christopher Reeve mistook like the news of like Superman Returns being in the works, and he said like, so you're playing Superman. It's just like, oh no, that's somebody else. It's like, and basically it should have been you. So he gave Tom Welling like the approval, like he really believed that he would have been made an excellent Superman.
Yeah, I mean, well, because obviously Reeve, having seen what Tom Welling was doing on Smallville, obviously, because Reeve was very impressed and pleased with what Tom was doing with the portrayal of the Man of Steel.
Brief aside about Tom Welling in this.
Well, just very quickly. I mean, it would have been nice to comment on that. If they considered, if the documentary considered on having that, because I mean, it was kind of a big thing, and because with Reeve being on Smallville, and with both him and Tom Welling making this message, and but you know what? Sometimes it depends on it. It all depends on the documentaries and the specific running time on documentaries. So. We can't,
because there is a point in the documentary where you're going to check out,
Exactly. Yeah, I was about to say, not all we can't have every single thing. Even what we hope and we would love for to be talked about in documentaries. Just it's not always going to happen.
Nope.
No.
All right. So, Tom Welling in the CW, the Crisis on Infinite Earths, like 5-part special they did, which varying results of quality. A couple high points, and one of those high points was the return to Smallville with Tom Welling growing up. Still Clark Kent, but still they didn't put him in the costume. But
And what's her face? Lois Lane. Yeah, her
yeah,
too.
Erica Durance, I believe, or
That's
Durant.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so there's a moment. I still geek out about this where he is, where the John Cryer Lex Luthor is still underrated Lex, such a good Lex. Which again is in Superman 4. We redeemed him, we made him a Lex, and made him a really good Lex. In my opinion, I thought he was anyway. So he pulls out the kryptonite, and this is a Superman who's kind of he basically did the Superman 2. He relinquished he went into the Red Sun chamber. He relinquished his powers. That's the implication. He gave up his powers to have a family. So he pulls the kryptonite on him, so it's a fake out of like he's affected. But when he acts like he's affected for a moment, he does like he does the Christopher Reeve kryptonite reaction from '78, and it's awesome.
Cool.
And it's like just for a moment you can get, cause that's the thing, because I'm bridging this into what I wanted to bring up. If they were going to use an additional clip that would have been really relevant to the documentary, again, I would have added runtime. It would have been cool. Is that aside from using clips from the actual show, at the end of as like a promotional thing they did for that episode, that big event of Christopher Republic. I don't know if they did like just in like the tail end of the episode or not. I think they did. You had Tom Welling and Christopher Reeve side by side. So you kind of had young Superman, old Superman in a sense, and you had them basically doing a plug for the Christopher Reeve Foundation. And there was like a number on the screen, like please call and that kind of thing. And basically at the end of it, it was really it was the most charming. I recommend everyone now, like at the end of this podcast, check out this clip, okay? Just like just type in like Christopher Reeve Smallville, it'll pop up, and it's like this little ad that they did. It's like the bumper at the end of the episode, where they're playing like the John Williams Superman theme. It's like and while they're doing that, it's like they're saying thank you, no thank you, and then Christopher just like they're killing time before the thing cuts. Essentially,
please call.
Yeah, just like please, please call. Just they all break out laughing. It's the most charming thing you've ever seen. It's just the fact that it's like, oh my god, it's like if Christopher Reeve had a Kermit the Frog moment, it was that. It was perfect.
Yeah. Even even in the documentary where there are some clips of Reeve, even after his fatal accident, where he let out some jokes at times. Yeah. You know what I'm talking about. It was. I mean that shows you, even for someone who's going through a lot of shit, and even with their conditions, they can sometimes just once in a while throw out a good joke, and just to keep in a positive light note, just
So, getting into the last 30 minutes of this thing, just around, kind of round things out here. There's such a great balance of tragedy and hope within these last 3 minutes, because it takes you on a roller coaster, man. It hits you with like the saddest stuff you've ever heard, but also the most uplifting stuff.
Yeah.
We have the tragedy of we have like some really uplifting, three uplifting things we have like right off the bat. We have like he taught Will how to ride a bike without even having from the chair. He was able to do that.
Yeah.
He directed the Brooke Ellison story, which essentially is early on. I completely forgot about this till the rewatch here. Is that early on, like Christopher Reeve, the younger like '70s era, Christopher Reeve was asked like, "What are your goals after Superman?" Well, I'd like to take on a variety of roles and maybe direct. So throughout his life, he did take on a variety of roles, and in after his accident, he was able to direct.
Yeah, even like those that do appear in the documentary, like from, as I mentioned, Susan Sarandon, and there's also Glenn Close and Whoopi Goldberg, and the fact, because one film
the two of them were in a movie.
Exactly, yeah, because like one film that Reeve directed, which that has both Goldberg and Glenn Close, and where basically like one thing in this movie is where Glenn Close plays the mother of this boy whom is soon to die because he has AIDS and such.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, and then speaking of Brooke Ellison, am I saying that right, Brooke Ellison?
Yeah, Brooke Ellison. Yeah.
All right, yeah, because you're making sure, because Brooke Ellison herself, whom, by the way, may she rest in peace, because her being a part of this documentary, and because sadly, Brooke I presume, yeah, she died not long after she got to be a part of this documentary, and the fact she's one of those that this documentary is in dedication to her. So it's amazing to see, and this isn't the first time where some documentaries would have some people actually be in the documentary themselves, and even before they've sadly passed away. So, and Brooke Ellison being one of them.
Yeah, and just an inspiring story, just the fact that her mother helped her through Harvard, and she became a neuroscience, got a degree in neuroscience. It's something, it's something beautiful, and again, something kind of Reeve kind of like he put out there, making the essentially the TV movie about her life, which really kind of really put a lot of put it out there that this is what can be achieved, and it's the fact that if you look upon a disabled person with pity, and you're kind of like putting them into a camp of like they're helpless or they're maybe less than, it just kind of diminishes like the contributions they can have to society, and that's essentially what Ellison, again, she's again, as Christopher Reeve kind of put it, like smart as a whip and is very interesting and could save the world one day, and
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the other people that appear in this documentary, from say, Dr. Stephen Kirschblum and an assistant to Christopher's, Laurie Hawkins, because their presence in the documentary, as well as John Kerry and yeah, Michael Mangelio, as we mentioned, yeah, because their presence in the documentary, and Kevin Johnson, yeah, just amazing. And because with all of them having known Christopher, it's just, yeah, what more do I have to say? It's amazing with them being in the documentary and with what they have to say.
an image on the rewatch ever since after I saw it in the theater, when I saw it like on at home. I was gonna say home video. I wish it was on home video. Believe I would buy this thing in a second. Believe me. Was we a very striking image. It's kind of this striking and moving image of the film where it's Christopher Reeve essentially walking his dog, and the dog happens to be white, like
Yep.
Crypto. It's just a thing of
Oh,
beauty.
yeah. That actually never crossed my mind until now. Because now that you
And
mentioned crypto,
yeah,
what a coincidence.
and then very kind of tragically after his passing, which we'll get into in a second. Just after his passing, we have like
Yeah.
there's an empty chair and the dog without an owner.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's the thing. So with the balance of we have had the uplifting and with the tragedy, we have a very, and again, look, I'll speak from experience. I'm sure Kogias anime fan is something probably similar, and that anyone probably again is the very relatable and tragic demise of Christopher Reeve.
Yeah, and if you're still there, Kogios, feel free to leave another comment.
Yeah, well, no pressure though, but if you want
Oh
to,
yeah, I'm saying, yeah.
yeah. But yeah, I don't want to get into that. I don't want to get into all the horrible stuff. But let's just say, I mean, frantically, frantically trying to, to kind of like the reviving kind of a crashing loved one. It's rough. It's
Yeah,
bad. And just the
it is.
idea, there's the again, infection, basically kind of like bringing it. The frantic situation of getting this happening in the middle of the night and then just having to revive them a number of times just to be able to say your goodbyes. It's a whole, it's harrowing and it's sad, and it's ultimately just he put so much work in over the years. It wasn't like a bed sore infection. Which, I mean, I remember in the public consciousness, you and I think you and myself and probably everyone probably always kind of assumed that's kind of probably pure and simple what it was. It was just like a guy gets tired after all that. It's age 52. He a lot of energy into trying to trying to get out of that chair, and just in general, it's the condition. It's quadriplegia is not people die young of that condition. It happens. That's why it's kind of a time crunch. That's why he put all of his efforts into trying to get out of that chair and get people out of those chairs as soon as he could, while the time that he had.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, and just Christopher's, actually very quickly, because right after I mentioned Kogios, he did leave a comment. He says the documentary should have come out on Blu-ray and DVD today. Well, I think, well, technically, I I actually did at one point before I rented it on Prime. I looked and see if by any chance like I'd get a Blu-ray or DVD. Technically, they're technically out there, Kogios. I'm not kidding, because I've seen a few copies of the documentary itself being on Blu-ray and DVD.
Really?
You weren't aware, Dragon?
I mean, I looked Monday. That's the thing. I mean, do new stuff comes out? I've been looking for it. So I mean, I haven't seen it like Amazon though. That's the thing.
Well, point being is that before I ended up renting this documentary on Prime, I actually at one point early on this month looked to see if by any chance there would be Blu-ray and DVD copies of this documentary, and they are technically out there. So
I question your findings on that. Frankly, I do.
okay, but I'm being serious. They're out there. So
yeah, but look, I don't want to bring it down to semantics of where. Okay.
Dragon, I Googled it. I simply Googled it.
You Googled it. Okay.
Yes, I did. They're out there.
I had a feeling those might be burned copies, but I don't know.
Well, I was about to say, whether if they're official or not, or if they're...
That doesn't count, though, if they're burned copies, because then, yeah, you're right, it is out there. I thought you meant, literally, they did a release, of the thing.
I mean, they should, technically, because it wouldn't be fair to people who don't have streaming and don't have Max, so...
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I just discovered this earlier, as of tomorrow, and as we do the stream, tomorrow Max is going to go back to being called HBO Max.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thought I'd throw that out.
Yeah. All right. Okay.
Yeah,
so,
but I was going to mention this about when Christopher Reeve died because, and with what you said, Dragon, because and even they say in the documentary from Alexandra and Matt that it was bound to happen at any point, any day. And the fact that it did, and even say the day before, that evening, they were watching baseball and their favorite baseball team and such, and Dana felt as though that everything was going pretty well, and she booked for this singing performance or something. Yeah, and at the residence house of the house of the Reeves family, it was just Christopher and Will and the nurse that was there, etc. And everything was going pretty well, and just watching baseball. And after midnight, because Will being asleep, and then just out of nowhere, and with what Will described, his bedroom door being slammed open, and the nurse waking and alerting Will about what was going on with his dad, and which out of nowhere, sadly, Christopher just then went into this deep coma and had to be sent to the hospital, and just with poor Dana, because when she was rang up about this, and Will had never seen/heard his mother be so upset like this before. And just Dana just determined to get there, even, say Alexandra and Matthew, going to be there as well. Alexandra did make it there, but unfortunately he unfortunately didn't get there on time. And even Dana, she managed to show up. She rushing into the hospital, and even say when I think 4 or 5 times Reeve kept dying, and yet he came back to life to still keep him, alive and steady, and especially, for him to be alive when Dana would show up, and Dana just showing up, and according to Alexandra, just her shouting straight to Reeve, I love you, just, the impact and the power that happens at that moment, just, it hits you right there. And, of course, for me, like I said, I don't cry and I don't get emotional when it comes to watching documentaries or movies, etc. But, again, you can totally feel the impact and power at that moment right there because, and, well, sadly, in the end, Christopher did sadly die, and, hey, at least he no longer had to deal with so much pain by that point, and in a much better place. So,
right. But yeah, I thought it was a moving kind of touch that after he, of course, we see Robin Williams at the funeral, and he's gutted by it for sure, and it's again just seeing the world mourn, and all the Superman tributes and the people in the Justice League costume showing up at the kind of like the little the little flower, the Superman symbol in the flowers, like the little kind of like I'm looking for the word right now. The altar, kind of the altar to the Man of Steel and the Christopher Reeve and all that.
Yeah.
I found it really sweet that the van that Robin Williams bought, Christopher Reeve and family, got donated to help a child, be able to
Yeah.
go out into the world. And it's like, yeah, that's just right. That's yeah. And then, of course, again, we go from tragedy to uplifting to again just like what, just horrible tragedy to Dana Reeve. She passes away within a year. Like
Yeah,
like
18 months after Christopher died.
might have been 17, but yeah.
Hey, oh, was it 17 months?
I think it was 17, but again, the point being is, yeah, within like roughly a year or so. But
Yeah, because I had a feeling, and when watching this documentary at that point, where well, obviously this documentary was going to talk more about Dana, and when it came to Dana and what happened with her, because and obviously that was at that time that was devastating. The fact that we had lost Christopher, and to think that little did we all know, even the Reeve family, that Dana was going to be gone as well.
yeah, yep. And it's I feel so much for Will Reeve. I really do, and it really hit me just the moment of like that poor kid just saying that ever since losing her, ever since like 2006. I besides the support obviously I have the family around me, but just I've been alone since.
Yeah.
It is it's gut wrenching. This poor kid. By the way, I love that his kids just look so much. His sons look so much like him. It's crazy.
Even Barack Obama commenting that he looks so much like his dad that
Yeah,
it's true. So and another thing is that because with what happened to Dana, because apparently out of nowhere, and she was booked for singing and such. Well, experiencing this cough she had, and it turned out to be very serious. And it turned out she got diagnosed for lung cancer. And the fact that not a single time in her life did she smoke
yep. It
one
was the
cigarette.
rare non-small cell
It
form
is.
of yeah.
It is it is a rare thing, and for that to happen to poor Dana, she didn't deserve it. She didn't deserve this. That poor gal just and
Same thing. I got Andy Kaufman too.
exactly, yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. I don't think I quite fully had full knowledge of that, but man,
Oh yeah.
that too, because but just point being is because with what was going on with poor Dana, but the fact she was determined not to die and to leave
Because she
behind.
wanted to be there for that kid, for those kids,
Yes.
especially her own son. She wanted to, she fought it. She did everything she was a fighter. That Dana Reeves is such an amazing human being.
Yes. But even before that, like even and after Christopher's passing, because Matt especially, he was definitely there for Will, because and according to Will, Matt was there not only being a good brother to Will, but also in a way also being like a another dad to Will. So um
Oh
and
yeah.
and not to mention that it was mentioned very quickly where in between the passings of Christopher and Dana, because well, yeah. First went Christopher. Then in the middle, Will's grandmother, his dad's side, she had passed too. And then after that, and in 2006, then went Dana. It's
Yep.
and even though Will says, and with what your comment is on that Dragon, where ever since March of 2006, the day Dana died, Will being alone ever since. Well, I understand what he means, but you know, he was never alone, because here's the thing, because what happened afterwards, I mean, here's the thing, because even after Christopher passed, Dana kept going with the Christopher Reeve Foundation, now being in charge of the foundation, and after she passed away, then the foundation would be renamed the Christopher and Dana Foundation, and the three kids, Matt, Alexandra and Will, they would find themselves in the positions of being in charge and leading the Foundation. And it's great to see even the people that have disabilities. In fact, where there's a moment where Will is with this one man who, at one point in his life, no longer walked, but somehow, and it was a miracle, he then started to walk again.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess getting to the kind of the cathartic kind of pathos of the film, just the end. The end of this movie is pitch perfect. Just Christopher Reeve. We have him in his own words. Just kind of like rounding us out, and we see the efforts. The efforts that helped disabled walk again, which again just always just cut me to the core of my being. Just seeing like
Mm-hmm.
just and also the fact that we see like a man kind of walking, getting up from the chair and walking alongside Will Reeve of all people. So it's very much this
Yeah.
beautiful full circle moment of it. It's like we've taken so much away from this poor kid, but we've given him his father's dream, and he and the rest of the Reeves children, like they're carrying on the legacy. And it's just this moment of like, Christopher Reeve, he wasn't able to see it in his lifetime, but he put in the research and the goal and the dream to everyone to kind of make it a reality. So it's like the hope that he talked about, it wasn't false hope at all. It was real, it was tangible. And like I said, he's both in the literal sense, the figurative sense, I guess. He went from Superman to Jor-El. He provided his children the tools and then this kind of the guidance to they kind of again keep kind of like the Superman that he had become, to kind of bridge that to other people again, to show that they lack the light, Kal-El. They can be a great people, Kal-El. They only lack the light to show the way, like I said earlier. And again, I want to echo my own sentiments here, but again, I just love that thematically we turned the kryptonite that kept him down all his life into the stupid green crystal that it shouldn't have been green, but what if it was green for a reason in the cosmic sense? It's like that crystal, like we turned something that is identified as like, something that's always like weakened or, hurt Christopher Reeve. We turns in like this he suffered again, almost like kind of a Christ-like parable, which we always do. Superman is like the thing that always like kept him down and put him in a state of vulnerability, and inspired everyone told everyone, we can be better, we can do more, we can we can walk again, we can we can if we work towards it, if we're there for each other, if we put good in the world, it was the green crystal. It was the foundation to build everything. This horrible thing that happened to him, like lifted the rest of the world. And he embodied what Superman represent, which is not about the physical strength. It's not about like how hard can Superman punch somebody. It's about what his words can do. It's about what just him being, just him showing up can do to a room. And ending on him giving the definition for what a hero is. He thought the hero was like the traditional, like a hero is somebody who does something very sacrificial, or does something very without thinking of their own safety. Or then, of course, after everything that he's been through, he's just redefined it to be like a hero is somebody who goes up, basically is facing insurmountable odds, or it can be an ordinary person, and just with
Yeah.
go up against like like the something that's hard, or something, just having the perseverance and going through like difficult time.
Mm-hmm.
you know
And how fitting it is that the very last shot we get of this documentary, oh, just very appropriately, it's the final. It's of course the iconic final shot in all four Superman films, where Superman is flying in the orbit of Earth, and he smiles for the camera and flies over it. Just it's so great that documentary ended off with that iconic shot.
Oh, that question is like the only way it could end. You have to end. It's like that's the best way those movies ended, with him flying to camera, smiling, and you have to do it here. It's plus it's kind of him ascending. It's him again. it's that winning smile from Christopher Reeve, the one that again made him the icon, made him just kind of that positive symbol in the world, and just
And I know I mentioned this earlier. Wouldn't you agree, Dragon, that he like making like this him being the definitive, variation of Superman?
oh, without question.
Because look, despite every actor who has portrayed Batman, oh my God, I meant Superman. Golly. Okay, but my point being is that
We don't know him, folks. He just wandered into this podcast.
okay, technically we did bring up Batman, especially with Michael Keaton. But okay, but my point being is that with every actor who's portrayed Superman after Reeve, well, even before Reeve, of course, we've had most prominently George Reeves. Well, okay, yeah, George Reeves was a good Superman before Christopher, but when it came to Christopher, and even after Christopher, everybody else who got to play the iconic character, the Man of Steel, all of them, they can never top off what Christopher specifically brought to that character, without question.
Yeah.
And I was also about to say, because it's appropriate that for the opening and closing to the documentary, it has to be something Superman without a question as well, because and it's very appropriate that that's what it does. Like one of the first things we see of the documentary is like a clip of Superman, and then at the very end, it's with that iconic shot where he flies, passing by the camera, smiling. So yeah,
I think it's appropriate that in his life, Superman, for a time in his life, Superman did kind of keep him down a little bit. It was always like the safety net of like, what you're doing, what you want to do, you're not qualified. Like the media has defined you unqualified to do, or like they don't think you're ready for this. So go back to put on the tights. It was always like the thing that kept him down. Debatably, kind of maybe put a big fork in his earlier relationship. And it's just the fact that through life, he found, again, between him and George Reeves, George Reeves always looked at kind of glass half empty with Superman, and that there was a positive impact on the kids, but other than that, he was being typecast, and his life was kind of ruined by the role, and he's always had the stupid Superman curse thing going around, and so this is always like the fact that Superman was such a forge of strength for him. It's that all these letters of support that he became, this beloved icon. It's the idea that at your lowest point, where it's like, do I want to go on? Like the big moment movie we actually mentioned too before we got here is like the thing that brought him back from the edge was Dana Reeves saying to him, "You're still you, and I love you."
Yeah.
I remember that. It's the whole like "still me." Like the reason one of his books called "Still Me" is because that's essentially what she said to him that inspired him to keep on going. That just the love and compassion the love that they had together that motivated him to what I'm not gonna give up. Which again is, and again it's like kind of the love again. That's the blending of Superman right there. That's the love that this man had in life with again just the icon that basically allowed him to become a symbol, and just by being himself, it's like when the two of them intersected into being this extraordinary human being. And again, it's why Christopher Reeve is the definitive Superman. It's because again, like like Downey Jr. had kind of like become Iron Man in the sense of like they he lifted him from his low point in a sense, and basically it was like all the cleverness of this actor and all the potential everyone saw in him, he kind of ascended to become like the best of Tony Stark. Maybe not like the most tech literate version of Tony Stark in his day to day life, for all we know, but he's still like he's did a lot of good. He inspired a lot of people, made a boatload of money, and built the MCU.
Mm-hmm.
Again, Christopher Reeve, though, again, he created something everlasting. He defined like the playbook for that character, and what we define to be goodness in the world, what we define to be what a hero is. And I mean, I'm gonna thank our folks here. I'm gonna round out on the exact quote of how he defines a hero. Okay, how's that sound?
Okay, I mean, yeah, because there were a few other comments that Kogias left. Like,
well, yeah, let's read off the Kogias comments, and then
And then round off, like, if we have any last words to say on the documentary, and from there on, but just, yeah. Because this one, like the first one, Kogias says he said at 12:01, where I would love to see a sequel documentary where the actors that played Superman after Christopher Reeve talk about how Christopher Reeve influenced them. That could be interesting if that were to happen. I mean, what do you think of it,
I think
Dragon?
it'd be interesting, but also look, it would be interesting. I worry they would all have the same thing to say, but I would. I think the way to spice it up would be if we got the animated Superman in on it.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. And then he also says, before I saw the documentary, I was in a low spot in my life. Hearing what a strong impact Christopher Reeve gave on the world, despite everything, gave me the optimism to lift me up. That's good. That's good to hear from you, Kogias. And then he also says the documentary is currently in my top 5 or favorite films of the decade. It may that big of a impact on me. I think as of now, for me personally, probably this documentary, it would be up there. It would be up there along with like 2 other biggies that I can think of that I really especially enjoy. So, but yeah, but anything for you to say on that, Dragon?
I mean, oh yeah, I mean this is up there. I don't know about like the decade yet because we're still like kind of like halfway in there.
Yeah, we
Um,
are.
as I'm saying, I mean as far as documentaries go, I mean again, I guess I'm trying to remember if it was 2019 or 2020 it came in. I think it was 2020. We had the again, like I always call it the Amadeus of animation documentaries, but Happy Happy Joy Joy, the Ren and Snippy story, which is very different from this, mind you.
Oh,
But I mean, those
yeah.
so far those have always been like the two like the documentaries for me of you know
hmm
very different but very good. I mean, I think Happy Happy Georgia actually did make my number one year, so I loved it that much. I still love it that much.
hmm And yeah, saving this for last because with what he commented, yeah, the hero quote is one of the most beautiful sounding quotes that I've ever heard in a long time.
Yeah. All right, so I want to thank the folks for for tuning in. I want to thank Kogi S Anime Fan. We have Jacob run things behind the scenes. Of course, we have Eli here in
hmm
the
Yep.
second chair here.
Yep. And Jacob, who was backstage and left one comment earlier in the chat. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So anyway, yes, I want to thank everyone for tuning in again. As a reminder, when we see the new Superman movie again, like no one's ever going to measure up to Chris Reeve. We know that already inherently. There's always going to be
Yeah.
Donner Superman, no matter how good this new Superman movie is. Measure up to Donner is always like the impossible task. But you know what? It's nice to see like kind of a little tip of the hat. Like Will Reeve's going to be in that movie too. By the way, he has a
Yeah.
cameo in that movie. So James Gunn knows what he's doing. He knows he's like, okay, look, we're always going to be in the shadow of greatness here, but we might. It's very probably like DC Studios. This was the first thing that launched with this, I think, very appropriately because they know they're really building on Superman. It felt like this was like the right move, and I just I think it's important that we know where we come from before we just kind of we go in the new directions in the future, and that's kind of where we're that's kind of where Superman's going to be in everybody's mind. But I love to think that if people aren't going to sit down with the original Superman, they might happen upon this out of a curiosity, or at the very least, James Gunn, I'm sure, would be hyping this up as well, and people would be like, "Huh, let's watch this." And they'll be blown away, and they'll want to get deep into the lore of the Donner era Superman, all that kind of stuff, and just maybe check out a few of the Christopher Reeve movies that weren't Superman for the heck of it, somewhere in time, maybe, who knows. But
Yeah, and to comment on Will Reeve, because because him making a cameo in Superman, because he's basically going to be playing like a news broadcaster, from what I've heard, and I have no doubt that because with Will making an appearance in a Superman film, well, there's no doubt that probably he'd make his father very proud.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I think so. All right, folks. So just to kind of round things out here, Christopher Reeve said it best, and he closed this most perfect way we possibly could have. Where the way he defined a hero, kind of the date in his last days was. A hero can be an ordinary individual who finds the strength to persevere and endure in spite of overwhelming obstacles. That's what
Mm-hmm.
Christopher Reeve did, and we're all so lucky that he did. Like Godspeed, Christopher Reeve. Great Scott.
Indeed.